Right, okay, we'll get started then. Hi everyone. For anyone who is new to this and has popped along and thought, what's this about? It's just a live discussion. It's not just me talking for 2 hours, whatever it is. It's for people to throw their hat into the ring, whatever you want to discuss. I just sort of try and facilitate all that. Sometimes I might start rambling myself as well. Just throw out anything into the comment section you want to talk about. We do have a little bit of, well, I think it's breaking news. I can't see exactly what time it's come up, which is what I was just putting here to do with the Netherlight Crucible. I think I will be talking about this in a video a bit later. I may have to just shift that up a bit. So they've responded with about some of the criticism on the Netherlight Crucible. First of all, what I'm quite pleased about is they started off saying, hey guys. So I think this invalidates me on that Archives of Warcraft series where I was using guy as a largely gender neutral term. I'm pretty sure I've heard it used in many situations on both sides of the Atlantic as gender neutral. So there we go. But what they've basically said, is it's fine, shut up. But in terms of the details, and as I say, I'll sort of form more cogent thoughts in a video after this. There's actually 2 videos I want to do tonight. It says that we've been seeing a lot of discussion going back and forth on the Crucible lately. Fascinating that. As we've had some conversation with the development team, and I wanted to pop in and share a few points that came of it. So, regarding comparisons to Reforging, it says Reforging was always a simple mechanical choice, which is not what they said when they were trying to convince us that Reforging shouldn't be a thing, for a start. They were telling us that it was complicated, it was too complicated. Now it's a simple mechanical choice. Make your mind up. Players were, at the end of the day, simply replacing their worst stats with best stats on every item that didn't already have your best stats. So again, it's one of these things where they're trying to say, no, it's completely different to Reforging. Which I think misses the point, personally, because I don't think it's that the Netherlight Crucible is seen as a surrogate for Reforging. It's that it's seen as, if Reforging is bad, so is the Netherlight Crucible. And if the Netherlight Crucible is good, so should Reforging be. It's not that they're the same thing, it's that the same arguments both for and against both of those things are the same. So you either say that that system is good or that it is not good. It says the Crucible by comparison is only affecting a small subset of items, but it's affecting numerically a small proportion of all our gear, but it's affecting the most important part of our gear. Like, I'll just open this out to the chat here. What is the biggest demand on your time in Legion as a raider? Let's see what people think. What is the biggest demand on a raider's time in Legion? I'm hoping people can hear me, by the way. No one has actually said that they can hear me. AP, there we go. Thank you. We'll see if a few other people agree, because I'm not just going to say that is the correct answer. It's what I'm thinking of. But that's what I think. AP is the biggest amount of time spent by any raider. And I don't ram Mythic Plus Dungeons or anything. I think I've done 3 Mythic Plus Dungeons this week. But I spent a lot of time doing the world quests and stuff. I have gone from when the Netherlight Crucible came out, I had 63 artifact power. That was 2 weeks ago. I've now got 66. Exactly. So, and what is AP for? It's all part of the weapon. It's all part of the weapon thing. So are the relics. So it's all right saying here that it's only affecting a small subset of items, but it's the most important items in the game. It's stuff affecting your weapon. That is the thing of Legion. Just like the garrison was the thing with WoD, that was the thing that everything else was pinned onto. Our artifact weapon is what Legion is all about. So I think that's a bit silly. It says, and presents much more varied situations than, say, change 30 hit into chance into haste. It doesn't necessarily make it better in my mind. But anyway, they've said, I mean, there are some things in here I agree with. It says, we've seen a bit of discussion around players desiring the ability to respec the traits that are locked on the 2nd and 3rd tiers. We feel that the ability to They've said respect here. I think they mean respec. Traits would lead to players picking traits based on perfect optimization. Yes, of course, because that's what people want to do. If people are going to farm loads and loads of AP, I think they want a little bit of choice in how it's spent. And when I say a little bit of choice, I mean literally a lot of choice. Not the choose between this thing and this thing. But anyway, it says, while we feel it's a nuisance in itself. So they're saying that their own device is a nuisance. They put this thing in the game. By the way, it's a nuisance. Who calls their own like flagship piece of gameplay a nuisance? This would also make the system feel like a watered down version of Talent Rose and blah blah blah. But it is talent, isn't it? I mean, am I wrong here? I mean, people throw stuff in like, that's what it is. That's what the artifact is. It's an extra set of talents, except we don't choose them. We just get them. So this is, the Netherlight Crucible is just an extension of, I mean, you know, in 7.2 they gave us different traits on the artifact weapon, which just, you know, extended that talent system. 7.3 they've extended it again, except this time it's on the relics. And yes, you get some choice between two crap traits potentially, or between two good ones, or one or the other. Well, Fraser, I think this is true of a lot of people. I mean, I've noticed it trying to recruit. It's I can't really say where overall numbers of raiders are because it still seems to be very high, very high. But nonetheless, you have noticed that when people have quit, a big reason for it is can't keep up with the grind. And the other thing is, there are some people who still behave as if they were raiding in a previous expansion, in that they turn up to the raids, but they're not doing the other stuff around it. And if they're not doing the other stuff around it, then they're falling behind in effective power. They're getting carried, basically. So you do have to do it to a certain extent. It depends at what level you're raiding. Because but then people will sort of bandy about things like, well, you don't need it. Like, we don't need any of the Crucible traits to be able to do even Mythic Tomb of Sargeras. Of course we don't, because people did Mythic Tomb of Sargeras before the Netherlight Crucible. But that being said, everyone knows that you kill things quicker. Basically, there's this gap between your abilities as a raid team and your raw power, which you get from your gear. And increasing either one of those things, you increase your ability by practicing more on the boss, and you increase your raw power by getting better gear. And it's the combination of those two things that eventually gets you to beat a boss. So you can do it a little bit quicker. You can either do more pulls on a boss and increase your raiding time, or you can increase your gear by doing lots of Mythic Plus or something like that. But it's the combination of the two that eventually gets you to pull that boss over. So they are very important. When you've got someone who just through sheer dumb luck ends up with a load of rubbish trait. I mean, I've ended up okay. It's, as I said, with mine, I had a really bad set, the first character I copied on the PTR, then I had a really good set, like an amazing set. What I got when I went live was a mediocre set. It's all right. No complaints. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. Which I suppose will be the case for a lot of people. But for some people, it will be terrible. There'll be some people who get really amazing ones. It's just like, again, the RNG with legendaries at the start of the expansion. Some people got an amazing legendary early on. Some people didn't get one at all, so they didn't even get the statistic benefit of it. For a long time, for quite a while, doing the same content. So, anyway. Says, that being said, relics are items and will be replaced. I mean, for me, that makes it worse. Because let's say, if you get a relic that is absolutely rubbish, it's got terrible traits on it, obviously you'd be pleased to get rid of it. But if you get one that's got really good traits on it, you'll be very... In fact, it might not be easy. You've made it actually more difficult to replace, haven't you? And even when you do replace it, you're doing it with a heavy heart. Like last week, for example, I finally got rid of my tier 19 two-piece. Because I've been using all the way up to now tier 19 two-piece plus 4-piece tier 20. I've now got rid of it, which gives me more freedom with choice of legendaries. But at the same time, I don't know, I miss it. even though I now know that I'm doing more damage without it. Just because the item level fell too far behind and the item level of my other stuff got further ahead. So there'll be people who get a relic which is an upgrade in eye level but actually turn out to be downgrade. Yes. This is the problem. Yeah, well, I think with the post, obviously with one of these things, and I'd do the same, I'm not blaming them, I would do exactly the same, is, I would just pick on the silliest arguments in the thread. That way you get to look like you're addressing the points, you steer well clear of the cleverest points, you just address the daftest, or the easiest to argue with, shall we say. And that way you look like you're responding, but at the same time you don't have to answer any of the difficult questions. That's the nature of an internet argument, isn't it? That is the nature of it. I mean, I get the same thing. I will get someone posts a comment on YouTube. It doesn't happen very often, actually. But I get someone who posts a comment on a video or something like that. You'll come back at them if they, and if they look at it and go, oh, yeah. They won't say anything again. There's no argument because that's what you can do on the internet. You can just drop the mic anytime you like, and that's it. But anyway. Better Works will be available, and players who make choices they may not like now will have... So what they're basically pinning this thing on is, let's say you... Because this is the problem as well, when you... Because people are talking about respecing. In other words, you choose some traits, and then afterwards you realise that they weren't the best traits to choose. Possibly, because this is a thing as well, they have tuned... Now, I'm not saying the tuning wasn't necessary, but they have tuned some of those traits or fixed bugs in them since they went live. So someone may have made a choice based on one decision and something's changed, or their understanding of it's changed. And then they've changed their mind now. They want to change it, or they can't. So what Blizzard are saying is, well, you have to wait till you get a better relic. Don't worry, at some point you'll get a better relic. Well, what if you don't? What if it was a 955 relic? I just started reading Warcraft Chronicle. Yeah, I've given it a few reads. The first one more than the second. The second I only got this summer. Feel like there's a middle ground between person who sims everything and person who doesn't care what's best. Well, the thing is, the person who sims everything, it's a very small proportion of people, relatively speaking. I mean, you could argue the people who need that min-maxing the most are going to be Mythic Raiders, and Mythic Raiders are far more likely to sim. But there's still plenty who don't really know how to do that. Are they resetting the relics? No. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by resetting the relics, but they're not resetting them now. They're saying basically it's all fine because, when you get a better relic, then you can change it and you can change your mind. Yeah, your better relic might actually have worse traits in it. Or your better relic, as I say, if you've got, I've missed out, right? Last week, for example, I keep going over it because I can't believe it. We're doing the farm bosses in Timor Sargeras Mythic. And I was in on my bloody rogue to try and get it a little bit of extra gear in case it was needed on Fallen Avatar, Fallen Avatar, yeah. And indeed, I was on it with that rogue last night. It was a load of rubbish. Hated it. But a 950 Bis Fire Relic dropped off the second boss. Now, imagine I got that. And I chose some traits. And I chose poorly. Or Blizzard changed something in a few days. I want to change my mind. I'm snookered. I'm not getting anything better than that. Not until Antorus comes out. And even then, it would take a while. So, yeah, the Netherlight Crucible, the facts that they have, because I'll be honest, I was a little surprised. I haven't actually checked the forums recently, because you have to check the North American forums if you're going to check anything. It's the only place where anyone listens. But I know that when it came, because I was keeping an eye on it, I knew when it would come out that there would be quite a lot of discussion and that a lot of it would be quite critical of the system. Because this is often what happens. You can sort of see when you're on the PTR or when you're on the beta or the alpha, you know which systems are actually going to be poorly received. You can tell. But the problem is that there's, at that point when you can change it, if there's enough of like discussion on the forums early on, Blizzard can actually change their mind about a few things. The problem is that most people don't get involved in these discussions until they've seen it for themselves. And by then it's too late because it's gone live. And Blizzard, they can tweak things here and there, but they can't actually completely change the way it works because they're committed. They've done it. It's out. Forget it. Mythic Antorus is nice. It's smooth. Well, this is my point exactly. I mean, just putting it into... Actually, is it 960? I thought it was a bit more than that. Oh, right. The baseline, you mean. Sorry, yeah. But the Titanforge will go a bit higher. So you've got a reasonable chance of getting like... but, yeah, I mean, it's... I mean, obviously, most people are not going to have a 950 or 955 relic. But some do. And they're not immune to having made a poor choice because although, again, the large number of them would probably be Mythic Raiders where you've got your best chance, you can easily get those ones in LFR as well on a much lower scale or something like that. You've got a 951. I mean, it'll never drop again. So annoying. Yeah. Well, I mean, another argument of Blizzard's is that it's extra. It's not changing any of the traits you had before. So it's like, even if it's a bad one, it's still making you stronger. But the problem is, it might be making you stronger, but it's all comparative. You know, it doesn't matter if you're talking about PvP or PvE. Obviously, these don't work in PvP. But just generally speaking, in a game, all power of a character is comparative. It's how powerful are you compared to people that you are competing with. So if someone else gets a really good one, then comparatively, you've actually been downgraded. You've been nerfed in what you might call real terms. And then they said, I mean, this got me, this last bit, this had me creasing in laughter. So what it says is, the poster responded by saying the only way to know is to sim it. And it says, if you're generally a player who simulates gear upgrades to make decisions, you're probably going to do that anyway, and that's fine. If you're a player going off basic guidelines such as, I play a fire mage so I want critical strike, you will get by as you always did in this situation and pick what you think is best for your particular class or spec. Yes, and get it wrong. You'll pick what you think is best. That's what most people do. And they're often wrong because it's like monkeys typing on the typewriter. You've got very little chance of getting it right. But anyway, there we go. That's what they've had to say about that. Get rid of that for the moment. But have they say anything else of interest? Not really. I think the only other thing of note is, but I've not been watching it, is the Dungeon Invitationals. Oh, and that absolutely appalling invasion with the shadow area and all those big beastie things that cast all that damage that just basically kills you. They've nerfed that. So it might actually be possible to survive now. Or at least easier to survive. So that's a good thing. They have done a couple of good things since it went live. Yes. Yeah, they've done a few good things since it went live. Although, in both cases, they're things that you would have thought they should have been able to do. They're not the sort of thing that's only come about after getting, you know, 100,000 people testing it. That you couldn't have done on PTR. It's all very obvious to begin with. Well, Rose can click cloak for 5 seconds, and then they're just as dead as anyone. Sure, they can... I don't... Actually, would feint even work? I don't know whether it's targeted or just AoE, actually. I never really bothered to try and work it out. It really doesn't matter. It was extremely damaging. Well, the thing is, and I'll probably mention this in the video as well, this idea of picking what you think is best. There was a guy who won a Nobel Prize a few years ago for his work on, he was a psychologist. He had to win the Nobel Prize for economics because there isn't a Nobel Prize for psychology. Because he likened it to people's financial decision making just before the financial crash of 10 years ago. But basically, in the brain, you've got obviously there's different bits in the brain. There's two parts of the brain that can think about things and make decisions. One part of the brain is quite large and cumbersome, but it makes really good decisions. But it takes a long time to arrive at that decision, and it can only cope with like one thing to think about at a time. And then there's another part of the brain that's really good at making really quick decisions, but they're not necessarily the best thought out. But here's the kicker. This part of the brain will also lie to you. It will make you believe that you've made a really good decision. I think it's probably the same part, because I also know that they've done studies to sort of find that a lot of what you think are your memories are also lies. There's parts of your brain that just lie to you. So some of the memories that you have won't be real at all. Your brain's just hoodwinked you into making you think they were better than they actually were, for whatever reason. I don't know what the evolutionary reason for that is. I can understand the evolutionary reason for coming to a quick decision and having the confidence that it's a good one, because obviously in hunter-gatherer days you didn't have time to consider the best way to escape the saber-toothed tiger that's just jumped out in front of you. So sure, I get that one. But nonetheless, it does affect us in modern life. We constantly make decisions that are terrible, absolutely dreadful decisions. But we were so sure they were well thought out at the time. But it was our brain. Basically, it's like the Homer interlude with the brain. It's like the brain says, do this is a great idea. And you go, are you sure? Have you thought this through? Your brain goes, yeah. We've thought it all through. It's fine. We've considered every possible outcome. This is the one to do. All right, then. But, so inevitably, if you're just going to look at a situation and go, oh, yeah, that trait looks best, you'll be perfectly happy you're doing it, unless you know better. And most people don't know better. How would they? And you're getting it wrong, unless it's just by sheer luck. I mean, you could argue with the two traits in Tier 2, it's 50-50. So you've got a 50% chance of getting it right. And then again, you can argue another 50% below, because once you've picked one of the Tier 2, you've only got access to one of the two below as well. So you've got, like, you can argue it's almost a 25%, it's not quite like that, but almost a 25% chance of getting it sort of rightish. But I mean, thank goodness it is relatively straightforward to sim now, because that has been a big thing in Legion. Simming has always... I mean, simming has been a thing, really, for quite a long time. And it's been fairly accessible for people to be able to simulate stuff since, I remember, even in TBC. There was stuff out there you could simulate your character on. And for purposes of choosing gear and things like that. And but it's been so essential in Legion. Hi, Trillia. It's going okay, thank you. It's been so essential in Legion that we have to... I just have to say... Because you didn't have to. There was a time when you could just say, do you know what? Go for these stats. You know, you won't go far wrong. Just go for those stats, be fine. Or go for this stat up until this percentage, then go for this one. You can't do that now. But people... I think more people are starting to realise that. As the expansion's gone on, more people have come to that conclusion. But there's still a hell of a lot that will come onto Discord or go somewhere and go, so what's our stat weights? What's our stat priority? I think the next time I do a Retribution Paladin guide, which will be for Antorus, I think it will be the first one this Legion where I'm not even going to put anything to do with secondary stats on it. Like, I have done up to this point only because people are just going to keep asking. So I've just gone, all right, then do this. But I think this is going to be the first one. The next one I do, that I'm not going to do it at all. Oh, you've got Avatar down. Grats. We didn't. We did not. It was actually quite funny in some ways. It was funny and tragic at the same time. Because I was there on my rogue doing, like, no damage. And I was being whispered by my former GM, who have cleared the whole thing now. But... he was saying to me, why are you on your crap rogue on your rare? And I said, well, I need to soak. He says, no, you don't anymore, blah, blah, blah. And that's, in theory, I sort of understand that. We sort of do. But we don't in my guild. Like, we don't, even though in theory we have the classes that can soak all the stuff, we don't have the players to do it. There's certain players that just aren't doing it. And you can ask it, Wesix, if it's really quick, then I will answer it. But the other thing is, right at the death, we have killed in this guild a few bosses, I suppose, as any guild has, on the famous last pull of the night. And we had our famous last pull, and the phase 1 was actually the best phase 1 we ever had. It wasn't perfect. We still let the boss get too much energy at the end. So the transition was forced on us instead of being done at the right time. That being said, the boss was on just under 35%. We had everyone bar one person alive. So it was one of those things where it wasn't a definite kill if we did phase 2 right, but it was a possible kill if we did phase 2 right. And then the very first thing you have to do in phase 2, the very first thing, is you go out and soak all the rains. No. And we've practiced phase 2 as well. That's a given. You just go out and soak the rains. And people didn't. And that, I'm not going to say it was a definite kill. Of course it wasn't a definite kill. But it was a possible kill. That could have been it. We could have now been on 8 out of 9. But no. Because some silly beggar tried to do a few seconds extra DPS instead of going out and soaking stuff like they're supposed to. And what's that done for us now? Load of dead people. Can't possibly kill it at that point. Not going to get a rank. Don't get a rank if the boss doesn't die. Anyway, let's have a look. The new legendary coming on to us is one of the best. We don't know. It may or may not be. It does depend on which traits you get. I think the new legendary, it doesn't matter what class or spec you play, the new legendary, if it's worth anything at all, is bound to be an obvious thing to take if you've got loads of really good second tier traits on your relics, and not at all to take if you haven't. It'll be one of those things. It will depend. So people are going to have to sim that one. There's no two ways about it, really. But I strongly suggest that if you've got any class or spec who has BIS second tier traits, like 3 lots of Torment the Weak, say, something like that, and if that ring is not BIS for them, then it's a very badly designed ring, and presumably would need some tuning. So I think it almost inevitable that people would use it, you know, if they did get the good traits. Whether it's going to be better for some classes than another is of potentially more interest. Because, again, these second tier traits are not insignificant amounts of extra damage. And, you know, they may well benefit some class. Because you'll notice, like, several specs got a DPS buff when the Netherlight Crucible came out to take account of the fact that some classes and specs benefit more from weapon item level. Like my class and spec benefits quite a lot from item level of the weapon, but some don't. Obviously Windwalker monks don't. I don't know much about them. They've got the 9% buff, so it must be virtually worthless for them. But there's no real accounting given to how powerful are those second tier of stats to certain classes. Like, for example, take Torment the Weak. That does shadow damage. Well, what if you've got a class and spec that does extra shadow damage? Like, for example, I've still got this right, haven't I? I haven't played my Demon Hunter for a long time. But don't Demon Hunters get a shadow benefit from their mastery? They get... Do they? Or no, it's chaos damage maybe. But someone may well get shadow. I know certain classes with their mastery get a buff to a particular type of magic. Hi, Kisasha. Would it be a good idea for Mythic Plus gear to not work in raids or vice versa? No. No. Dungeons and raids are all part and parcel of the same thing. And I think it would be fine. I think Mythic Plus dungeons would be fine. I've said this before. If you didn't get AP at the end of them. If you got AP from... Like, this idea that they brought halfway through Legion where you get AP in your weekly cash based on the best Mythic Plus dungeon that you did the previous week, I think that's great. I think they should leave it at that. I think they should not give Mythic AP from Mythic Plus dungeons. And that way, people would just run it. Because I think the gear itself is enough of an incentive for some people to run it, but without making it essential. So I think Mythic Plus, because AP and Legion is all about encouraging us to do content that maybe we wouldn't without it. It's a strong motivator. But I think for some of the content, we don't need it. We don't need that motivation. There's enough motivation in just doing the content. Let's have a look. Will that mean that eye level will mean even less on relics with a legendary like that? Yes. Obviously, a legendary like that would devalue item level to an extent. That doesn't mean to say you can say that item level doesn't matter. But yeah, there could well be a situation where you're simming stuff and you sim a relic to see if it's going to be an upgrade. Like the usual thing, you know, you've got a relic that's 5 item levels above what you've currently got. So you sim it and see if it's actually going to be better, and you take into account the traits on the Netherlight Crucible. You would also have to do a sim taking into account if you've got that legendary ring, certainly. And it might well be the case that with the legendary ring, it's not an upgrade, whereas without it, it is. There is a possible scenario where that happens, yes. Unholy DK, there you go. But I know that there's various classes and specs that, with some sort of school of magic, their mastery sort of buffs it. And usually, even when it's from a source that's not directly from their spell book, it tends to work on that as well. So anything like, because there's different types of damage, aren't there? Some of them do shadow damage, so anyone that gets a buff to shadow damage presumably is going to get more benefit from it. And then another one to holy damage. I don't get any benefit on holy damage. Used to, not anymore. Mythic Plus gives. Well, you say that Mythic Plus gives little gain. It has to like Titanforge, but it does do that. I know people who do Mythic Plus dungeons for gear. It is a powerful enough motivator. That's what they're really after. They're not bothering about the AP. The AP, obviously, if they run enough of them, builds up. But ultimately, they're doing it for gear. They're trying to get BIS relics. Because if you do enough of them, Titanforging is not a rare event. That's the thing. Titanforging to 955 is a rare event. But Titanforging is not that rare. It does tend to happen. So if you do enough dungeons, if you do, say, 20 dungeons in a week, you've got a decent chance of getting some nice pieces in your group. And there are some people who will do that many quite easily. Some people will do more. And the other thing is, we don't need everyone to be running Mythic Plus dungeons. You know. You had 2 955 Titanforged pieces. Were they any good, though? Or were they only good because they were 955? Repal, well, it depends on your motivation. It is. For some people, it is worth it. For people who really don't fancy the concept of, as we have had, like 200k wipe or something like that, then it is worthwhile. If people have got the time to do that, and they've, you know, people will run 20, 30 Mythic Plus dungeons in a week to get one upgrade. That for them will be if they've got the time to spend that anyway. That will be for them time well spent. And it's no mystery that the best geared players in the world are also the players who do the most Mythic Plus. It's that simple. The best geared players in a guild will be the ones who run, not only do the raiding with you, but also do loads more Mythic Plus than the average player in that guild. But the problem is that by making people do Mythic Plus dungeons, instead of just encouraging it, because if with gear it encourages you to do it, but it doesn't force you to do it. You're not going to be way behind someone who doesn't do it. But with putting AP into it, it sort of does, even though it doesn't force you like it used to. It was much worse earlier, like half a year ago. It's not that bad now. But nonetheless, the people who do lots of it are the ones who, like I've just got 66 on my artifact level. Well, the ones who push it a lot are on 69 or maybe slightly more. They're actually unlocking the first hidden trait at the bottom, the relic trait. Hardcore Mythic Plus runners aren't the majority, certainly not, no. But the majority of people doing Mythic Plus are not doing it for the AP. Because for the time spent, you don't even get that much. It's more efficient to do world quests than it is to do Mythic Plus dungeons. And if you've got time to do all the world quests in a day that give AP, and do Mythic Plus dungeons as well, you've got a lot of time on your hands. And you could easily run Mythic Plus. But the motivation is for gear. The chance of gear. I mean, we had someone in my guild who they have run Upper Karazhan this week because it's got nice affixes for doing that. They said 16 times just to try and get an Eye of Command. The irony is, I did an Upper Kara this week and a 915 Eye of Command did injury drop. No one really wanted it. So we gave it to an alt. No one wanted it. There will be some, I think. I don't know, but I would think you will have some high Mythic Plus runners that don't do Mythic raiding, because it is a separate thing in itself, isn't it? You know, you can compete in Mythic Plus. You do lose out, having said that, on some of the really nice trinkets and tier that you can get in raids. Obviously, you would expect them to still do at least heroic and hope that they get some nice Titanforge procs. Hi, everyone. But yeah, it would not surprise me at all. Like when they first announced Mythic Plus dungeons, like a couple of years ago, it seemed to me that this is something where you could get all those people who were saying they liked 10 man. Most of them I didn't believe. I think they were just making excuses. But some of them said they liked 10 man raiding because of the small, cozy group size. Well, Mythic Plus Dungeon is a perfect way to do that. You can do it with a group of friends, and you know, you can do it competitively. Well, when I say competitive, I'm not obviously talking about doing these invitationals. Although with the invitationals, surely you'd have. Wouldn't they just let you use it? You don't use your actual characters, do you? On it? I don't know. I haven't been watching it, but you could still compete in terms of. You know, you can still get a good Mythic Plus score, I would think, without the set bonuses. Especially for some classes and specs. Some classes and specs don't even have good set bonuses. The trinkets, I would think, potentially a little bit worry. But again, there's so many trinkets that you might be able to still get decent ones from those. But I think you can do Mythic Plus dungeons as a valid form of endgame now. Without having to do high-end raiding. The issue is that you don't really want to force people to do loads and loads of it. Like, where it should be, really, I think, is just like challenge mode was. It's a better version of challenge mode. And I think it should be seen like that. You know, people weren't like doing lots and lots of challenge mode, but you had enough people doing it that it was a worthwhile piece of content. And it's not even like Blizzard have to spend a lot of development time on it, surely. They just need to come up with a few fixes and make sure they all scale. Item level wise, yes, it is. The difficult thing at the moment to catch up on is legendaries. AP is relatively all right to get hold of. Gear is, of course, all right to get hold of. Yes, but the thing about raiding heroic raids, it's not about the item level. It's about tier sets and trinkets. And, of course, the possibility that you might get one Titanforge. But, you know, if you... I mean, you do it every week. You're bound to get something eventually. But it's not the item level. See, again, we've got this fixation with item level. Item level doesn't mean that much. How many players actually play, do you think, like well-geared players from wherever they get that gear? How many players have, if you compare their equipped item level with what they could equip, how many actually have those two values close together? I don't think very many. I think there's about 5 or 6 item levels between my equipped and what I could possibly equip. And that's actually just, you know, it used to be much more than that. Because, as I say, I've only just dropped my tier 19. So having 2 pieces of 905 item level gear was bringing down my equipped item level. Well, if you're only 900 on your rogue, it might be that you haven't done that much stuff, really. I'm... what am I on my rogue? Can't remember. It's about 925 or something like that. And I've got 2 random legendaries. I've also got the boots. If you just... You loot those off the auction house. But in terms of actual legendaries that you have to rely on a bit of RNG for, I've got 2. No, well, some specs don't. I'm not actually using any set bonuses on my Assassination Rogue, for example. I mean, people keep telling me it's not that good. I still quite like it, though. I've noticed times even on Fallen Avatar where it wouldn't have half been handy. Like, you know, even the reduced cooldown on Garrote, because... Sometimes you switch to the Maiden, you're thinking, well, Garrote's on cooldown, just used it. Well, you say your difference is only 3. Even 3 is quite a bit, though, isn't it? I mean, it used to be less than 1. You know, you might have a piece that wasn't quite ideal. I hope with that pawn you're putting in your stat weights that you've got for yourself and not the ones that the add-on has as default. Well, yeah, Adam, that's another good point. There are some things that will, of course, bring your equipped item level down just to identify how getting out of date item level is to a certain extent. Because, yeah, if you've got an Arcano Crystal... that can be worth quite a bit. There are some, which I'm now informed, tanks, at least Guardian and I think Brewmaster, where some relics you can, you know, to get the best traits, you will take a very hefty item level drop. So there are things that could cause you to deliberately drop your item level for the sake of being more effective. So, yeah, actual item level doesn't matter that much. Apart from, of course, getting into pucks, where, of course, you need 960 item level at least. Do I think the WoW community is happy with the Titanforge system? I'm not sure. I don't think the serious raiding community is happy with it. In fact, I'm quite sure they are not. Whether the overall WoW community is, though, I couldn't say. And nor do I think, could Blizzard say, because I don't think anyone's there to ask them. If you mean by the community, though, the people who actively discuss things on like forums and wherever, then I think by and large it's not well received. But the argument Blizzard would make there, and actually they may be right, is that that is a small proportion of the overall player base. Well, this is it, Rick. The Arcano Crystal, it's actually become hilarious now. Because, okay, they brought out this trinket, which unintentionally was really good. So then what they said is, you know, they approached the situation seriously sometime later and said, well, we don't want to rebalance it because some people have got it. And we just reckon that in a while, the item level will be so low that people won't bother with it. But the problem is, and this again comes back to the fact that people will run content for small gains. There are people who will try to get the Arcano Crystal either by doing the world boss, which you'd probably do anyway, but including even coining it, as well as keep getting trinkets from the vendor, the shard vendor, just in the hope of getting a decent item level 1. You know, our DK tank 2 weeks ago did that, and he actually got a 925 one with a socket. I don't think he even uses it that much. I mean, he might do. But, so, yeah. So this idea that it would fade, because that was what they were saying. They recognised that it was too powerful, disproportionately powerful. And they just basically said, well, you know, it'll just be too low item level at some point. Well, it hasn't, has it? Because there are ways to get a higher item level 1 without even being excessively lucky. You have to be fairly lucky if you're just going to throw, like, Argonite at it, don't you? Because, first of all, you've got to be lucky to get that one trinket. There's so many trinkets you could get. And then to get... I mean, I suppose you're guaranteed at least a 910 one, I guess. Compounds with the relative uselessness of Veiled Argonite for anything other than gear tokens. Well, yeah, that's it. That's all it's for. I mean, that's all I do. You just spend it on something. Like I'm spending it at the moment on shoulders, because shoulders are my non-tier piece. I don't have anything, so I want better stats on it. And braces, because again, I don't have good stats on them. They're not terrible, but they're not good either. So I'd quite like that. But of course, it's got to Titanforge quite a long way to be worth it. So most of mine are just Chaos Crystals. What else is any raider going to spend them on? Malinoric. There's nothing to spend them on. That's, I think, the point, isn't it? You spend it on gear. They're obviously more valuable for someone gearing up. Actually, I mean, they're really good for that. I'm not knocking the system. Because if you've got a new character and you want to gear them up, you get them onto Argus, you get those World Quests done, you get the Argonite, and you go getting yourself, first of all, the relics, get your weapon up, and then other bits and pieces as well to fill in the gaps from your Pug raiding or Mythic Plus or whatever else you're doing. But for a Mythic Raider, yeah, there is nothing else to get. There's no cosmetic items for them, no toys, no pets, no mounts. And there's a limit on how many you can even hold on to, which sort of seems a bit weird to me. It used to be a really short limit. Got you out from 900 to 928 in less than 2 weeks from the vendor. Yes, I can believe that, because again, even with that vendor, if you do enough of it, some of them will Titanforge. Tier 90. Can you get tier 19 from them? Really? You weren't supposed to be able to, but then again, it's not the first time that Blizzard have said that you can't get a particular type of gear from a vendor, and then it turns out you can. That seems a little odd. I didn't realise that. Have you? Oh, that'd be probably my dumb luck if I did that. Mind you, there'd be no point in me even trying to get gloves from that vendor, because I've got 950 tier 20 gloves. So yes, there's no real point in trying to better those at the moment. But yes, coming back to your point, I agree. Obviously, at some point, when the next patch comes out... Actually, what will happen first of all, hold on, because Antorus will come out, at which point that vendor, I suppose to begin with, won't look as clever, because it'll be a bit behind an item level. Maybe they'll increase the item level of the stuff it gives, I don't know. But then at some point, yes, there'll be the next patch, and they'll introduce either this... I suppose the same vendor, he'll just keep flitting about, won't he? He'll just disappear back to wherever we're off to on Azeroth. But whatever vendor it is, will then offer even higher item level gear, and the whole Arcano Crystal will constantly keep coming back. And I still don't have one. It was actually really annoying, because right at the start of the expansion, when even the 865 one would have been decent, I was actually getting decent ones. In fact, I think on my Hunter, I got an 875 one. My hopes for BlizzCon. My hopes for BlizzCon are, I suppose my main hopes are that the expansion, never mind the storyline, we could probably guess most of that, but the features announced for the new expansion seem more raid friendly. I think that's my number one hope, that the next expansion will be more raider friendly. Now, you know, because the quality of the raids is always really good. I'm not knocking the quality of the raids, but it's been a bit tough on raiders, and therefore tough on guilds that are trying to raid at serious level. But apart from that, I hope that they announce that the alpha will go live at a reasonable time and that I get into it. I hope they announce live on stage that I personally will be getting straight into the alpha as soon as it goes public. But I don't think they will. Casters, 2 crystals. Would casters want 2 crystals at once, though? Aren't there usually trinkets from raids that are actually quite good for casters? Like, isn't the... Like you had, what was it? There's a Gul'dan trinket that casters go mad for in tier 19. There's the owl trinket, which quite a few casters seem to quite like, from Sisters in Timber Sargeras. I'm not at all keen on the trinkets from my point of view in Antorus. I mean, they may well be good in terms of like the damage they allow me to do, but I don't like the concept of them. At the moment, I don't know. I think we're between topics. We were just sort of finishing the concept of trinkets and the fact that the Arcano Crystal, which was supposed to have died some time ago, because according to Blizzard, oh well, there'll be such low item level it won't be worth people chasing. They've of course put systems in place to ensure that the item level keeps up just fine if you are lucky enough to get one from whichever source that you can, because they're available from more than just the world boss, aren't they? So there's still plenty of people actively wanting the Arcano Crystal and seriously expecting to get it, or at least have some serious aims to get it. You won't be able to post links, I'm afraid. Yeah, I was saying our Blood DK got a 925 on with the socket. Anyone got any crafting recipes except for the shoulders one? What do you mean? Crafting recipes? What sort of crafting recipes? Yeah, I think there's only supposed to be one. Blacksmithing, you do a chest. Jewel crafting, you do a helm. Leatherwork, is the leatherwork in shoulders? Can't remember. But I think it's just per profession one piece, yeah. Although, as I say, jewel crafters get to do a helm, so you can sort of have a couple there. More friendly to raiders, would you think lowering the mythic size to 15 would work? No. No. That would make raiding far, far worse. It's already too small, I think, at 20. It makes it... To make it like... Here's the thing. People who want to raid... A lot of them don't want to do a lot of other stuff. They like other stuff to do. I know, though, I mean, from Blizzard's point of view, they must be thinking, God blimey, no one's ever happy. Because in WoD, there was a criticism that there was nothing to do outside of raids. In Legion, there is. There is stuff to do outside of raids. The problem is that people are compelled to do it. It's a bit like, right, you've gone out to a restaurant and you've had some dinner. You've had a nice steak, whatever. And then you fancy a bit of ice cream. So you have a little bowl of ice cream, just to round it off. Very nice. But then it's like someone brings you this giant fruit bowl filled with 5 gallons of ice cream. And you go, I don't want all this. I just want a little bowl. And that's, I think, what Blizzard don't understand. We just want something to do outside of raids. We don't want to be forced to do it. You know. So that's what I'm hoping for the next expansion. But the problem is we're not going to get it in the next expansion unless Blizzard agree with that point of view. So, I don't know. But that's how I see it. That so to be more raider friendly, there are raiders who just want to turn up at raid time. Okay, so at the moment, there's these sort of raiders are in one or two camps. Either they just still turn up for raids and don't bother doing anything else, in which case they're getting further behind in power because their artifact level is falling further and further behind. Or they just quit and give up. Either way, they're not of a great deal of use. So just allow those sort of players to exist. You know, that's a significant section of their customer base. Why on earth are they driving them away from the game? It baffles me. Seriously baffles me. Allow raiders the choice of doing something else and not other stuff. Reducing the size just makes the raiding experience less epic. It just makes it crap. And it also exacerbates another problem, which is already at 20 man, you cannot get enough variety of classes and specs into your raid roster, let alone your raid team. And reducing it to 15 just makes it ridiculous. There will be entire classes that just die out. Completely die out. Because you won't take them. Imagine if Tuma Sargeras, for example, was 15 man. Retribution Paladins would not exist in raiding. Because you would still want to take multiple of certain classes. You would still want to take multiple rogues, multiple hunters. You know, warlocks and mages, you know, very much up to choice, but possibly there. And all that sort of stuff. A couple of warriors, potentially. Yeah, well, top-end guilds, of course, do. They can afford to class stack. Like, you know, if, let's say there was a boss. Let's say you've got a, like, Tuma Sargeras, 9 boss raid. And let's say on 8 of those bosses, Retribution Paladins, just for the sake of argument to take mine, are complete trash. But on one of those bosses, they're amazing. You can bet your bottom dollar that those guilds will not have a Retribution Paladin on those 8 bosses. And they will have several on that one boss where it's good. Because those players have multiple characters. So they can do that. So looking at the high-end guilds doesn't really sort of factor into this. You've got to be talking about looking at the guilds where players have one character that they play. Maybe they've got another one as an alt that they use for split raids, but even that is not super common. I think it's getting more common, but it's not that common. But you're talking about, yeah, they've got one character. And if that character is no good in that raid and they can't get in, then they're looking for another guild. Or just being social, whatever. So let's have a look. So as a heroic raider, once I got my heroic kill Jaden, I haven't stepped into the raid and won't until next raid. Okay. Well, it's disappointing if you don't like it that much. 1/3 of your raid would roast. 1/3 of your raid would not be roast because they don't exist. All the top guilds hoover up all the rogues, any half decent rogues, and we're just left with not even rubbish rogues. No rogues at all. No rogues at all. I was talking yesterday on my video diaries that I do on Patreon about the fact that I just recruited a rogue for the second time this expansion. The first one didn't last very long. He lasted till the end of the tier, but then he didn't want to play rogue anymore. Then I recruited another one. He wasn't brilliant. We're not going to get a brilliant one at our level. But he could play assassination well enough. And I thought, you know, maybe he could practice subtlety, you know, and it'd be all right in the meantime. Because, you know, we're not going to be... He can still come in on most fights, because most fights are on farm. Just get his skill up with a couple of specs for Antorus. And he agreed with that. And but then 24 hours later, I'd already done the video, by the way, saying I was hopeful for this rogue. Put it up there. And he whispers me to say, sorry, I don't think I'm going to be able to compete with your guild. So we can't get rubbish rogues because they feel intimidated by our raid group. We can't get good rogues because all the top guilds have nicked several of them. There's not enough to go around. Can't get rogues. You have to be lucky. You have to have someone. The only reason we've got rogues at all is because of rerolls. They're the only rogues in our guild. Alts. That's it. Let's have a look. So you have to compel players to do world quests or mythic +5 mans. If you don't compel them, choose not to do the content. I don't think you need to compel them. I think you need to encourage them. There's a difference. If you encourage them, you're giving them a reward where if they've got spare time, they will do it. But if they can't do it, or they don't feel that they want to do it, that it doesn't put them far enough behind for it to be an issue. That's why I say the gear in Mythic Plus is a fine incentive, because you will be behind. If you don't do it, like I don't do very much of it, you will be behind people who do, but not that far behind. You can still compete at the same level as them. You will just be a bit behind. That's what you want. Well, you say there wasn't much reason to do CM once you got gold, though, but and as I say, for those ones who just want to get that and finish it, then yeah, sure, that's fine. They don't have to do it. All Blizzard actually want is for players to keep playing the game. That's it. They don't need us to be playing it every single day, lots and lots, because that's actually just driving us away, or driving some people away. But there were still people who did CMs because they did it for leaderboards. They did it to boost other people. Those things still exist as reasons to do it. But as I say, with CM, with challenge modes, you only had one limited set of rewards. Now you've got actually useful rewards. Mythic Raider is a small group compared to overall WoW player base, but it's also it's also a fairly key thing. Like, put it this way, why do they put so much effort into raids if they're not at all concerned by the Raider player base? Because some players are worth more. Like Raiders, for example, are the ones who keep up their subscription. Put it this way, a Raider is worth 4 or 5 at least normal players. So even though they're in the minority, they're like, if let's say you've got 10% of players raid. I mean, it's a bit more than that, but let's say, well, it depends what level you would call serious. But let's say you've got 10% of players that do some sort of serious raiding, whether it's heroic or mythic, say. They are worth half of a casual player base, because they will stay subscribed every month and raid every week, whereas casual players may raid, like they subscribe for a month, do some content, and then stop. All right, that's what they're trying to get away from in Legion, but I don't think it's working. So if you've got someone who subscribes every 3 months, straight away you need 4 of them to be giving them as much money as one raider, don't you? And then of course you've got raiders who tend to also spend money in other ways as well, whether it be transfers, which costs Blizzard next to nothing, but bring in plenty of pennies. In fact, to transfer 2 characters can cost as much as an entire annual subscription, can't it? If you have to faction change as well, especially, it can cost more. So although numerically raiders may not be the majority of the player base, I would say financially they are worth a lot more than might first be thought. Do you know what? I reckon there's another vlog in that as well. So I don't know. The best gear should come from raids. It does. The best geared players are raiders. But the best geared players of all, the ones right at the top of the heap, are raiders who do a lot of Mythic Plus dungeons. But if you've got players who do Mythic raids and players who do Mythic Plus dungeons, but, you know, seriously, the Mythic raiders are better geared. No real question about that. And that is the thing, Shadowfiend. Like, you've got to understand the dynamic of the player these days. It's not like it was before. Like, the original MMOs, and WoW was sort of at the back end of that, I think, as that was sort of coming to an end, were very, very serious, very hardcore. You would plough lots and lots of time into that one game. I mean, some of us still do. But the dynamic of players these days is not to do that. They want to do other things. Those other things might be other computer games or console games. They might be other things. It might be going to the gym or playing sports or watching telly or going to the cinema with friends or whatever it happens to be. A lot of players don't want to be shackled to one game. Even I now I resent the fact that I don't get to play the other. I mean, there's only a small number of other games I enjoy playing, but the fact that I, on a given week, don't get to play them at all, even I resent that a little bit. You know, even though this would still be my main game and I would play it every day, I don't like the fact that I don't feel I have enough time to play some of the others because, I mean, I know some of it is because I also do this channel, but, you know, it's because I feel that I have to be doing all my world quests and stuff like that. I don't want to. I just want to log on and raid. I mean, WoD for me was a marvellous expansion in many ways because I just had to raid. That was it. Dungeons, worthless. You know, when they brought in Mythic dungeons, worthless. Everything was worthless after the first month, apart from raids. But that was just me. Obviously, I'm not saying it was a good expansion. But for me, it was fine because all it had was what I want to do in the game. The leveling was good, I like leveling, and the raiding was good, and I like raiding. What's going to replace the artifact power system? I don't know. That is what I'm curious about them announcing at BlizzCon. I do think they will keep the system in a different form. I would like to think they will refine it. I would like to think it's not going to be exactly the same. But I haven't heard them say anything that gives me any confidence of that. But we'll just have to wait for BlizzCon for that. We are giving up our artifacts. Yeah, we knew that even before it launched. Because I remember during the alpha thinking, I wonder if this is now a core part of the game, the artifacts, weapons. No, it was only intended for that one expansion. Well, then there wouldn't be any such thing as Thunderforged if it was just going to have a maximum of 5 item levels. That's Warforged. If it's 5 item levels or a socket, then that's just Warforged. That's like the system that's existed for the last few years from MOP and WoD. Titanforged weapons, yeah, that's something I've talked about before. That is the real issue, isn't it? It is one thing to get a Titanforged set of gloves, like I've got 950 gloves. Very nice when you first get... Oh, I'm gone blurry again. Come back. Hello. No, it doesn't like it. Oh dear, there we go. Okay. It's yeah, so like I got my 950 gloves, very nice when you first get it, then you sort of forget about it. You sort of know not to bother trying to bid on any more tier tokens for gloves because you're probably not going to get anything better than that. But other than that, you put it out of your mind. Whereas a tier Titanforged weapon, you know, that's a different thing. That would be a very different thing. That's why Titanforged relics are you know, there's far more excitement generated with a Titanforged relic than with any other piece of Titanforged gear, with the possible exception of a select few relics. Yes, I used to like WoD as well. It was absolutely ideal for me. You know, I got to do my raiding and then outside. I mean, I started the YouTube channel during WoD, really, because I had time to do so. If I hadn't decided to do the channel then, there's no way I'd have decided to do a channel during Legion. Not an else chance. I don't personally see the legendary system changing much from its current iteration either. I do in one important way. And I don't think legendary weapons, but it is possible. Who knows? I think in one way it will change because Blizzard have said that they saw the problem with legendaries as throughput legendaries they saw as the issue. They said, the reason we don't like some of these utility legendaries, and we call them trash, is because the throughput legendaries are too good. So the implication there is that they're going to get rid of throughput legendaries, and that all of our legendaries next expansion will be things like speedy boots, or like, you know, hats that do damage when you stun something and rubbish like that. We shall see. I'm not sure I believe them, because I think... See, Blizzard, if Blizzard really do think that the reason we think those other legendaries are trash is because the damage ones are better, I don't think it's just it is a comparative thing, but I don't think it's just that. I think if that's all we had, people would still consider them trash. My top 3 expansions from 3rd to 1st. I think I would have to say that Legion is the best expansion. Although it is not the one I've enjoyed. It depends what you mean. Do I think in terms of if I were to review expansions, which one would I think was best? Or from my own personal point of view? From my own personal point of view, in terms of enjoyment, Legion would not be the best for me. The best for me would be TBC. That's just unfortunately the way it is. But that's a personal thing, not because I thought it was the best expansion. But in terms of the ones I think were the best expansion, I think Legion is the best, followed by MOP. But I'm not really the sort of person who should talk about these things because I stopped playing in Wrath after the first tier because it was so god-awful. And I didn't come back until the last tier of Cataclysm. So I can't really properly evaluate Wrath or Cataclysm. So I'm not really an ideal person to say that. But if it's for enjoyment, TBC was the one I enjoyed the most. I could argue that had I stayed playing the game in Wrath, that I would have enjoyed the rest of it. But I didn't. But Ulduar and ICC, I would have liked doing those with my, what was actually a very high, you know, a good guild. It was a very good guild. Well inside the top 100. I would have enjoyed doing that. Where do I see WoW in 10 years from now? Hopefully, I see another one. I mean, I'm one of those people that after the 10th anniversary said, I can see there being a 20th anniversary of WoW. And I still say that. I still think there's going to be a 20th anniversary of WoW. I'm not sure that it would have the legs to go much further than that, though. I struggle to see it going much beyond that. Because the thing is, I can see easily, like what we're coming up to now, the 13th anniversary. It's nearly, in North America anyway, but I mean, that's when it's first released. It's very nearly the 13th anniversary. So by the time the next expansion comes out, it will be very nearly the 14th anniversary. Then that expansion will last for about 2 years. So then it'll be coming up to the 16th anniversary. Then there's easily after the next expansion going to be another one. So that would take it right up to the 18th anniversary. At that point, even if it was starting to seriously dwindle, I think there would be enough movement from Blizzard to push it through to its 20th anniversary. I think even if the game was in a situation then, I'm not saying it would be, but let's say that the game was in a situation where normally speaking, you would say, right, it's pretty much done. Let's run its course. Obviously, you keep the servers open. You do a little, but you massively scale back the development. I think at the point at which it's 2 years away from 20th anniversary, that'll be such a big deal that I think they will still keep a major development cycle going. But at the end of the 20th year, unless I mean, we're into uncharted territory here because most people would never have seen an MMO lasting, not only lasting for 20 years, but with, you know, a good level of investment in it. I mean, there are other MMOs that are getting up. I mean, Lord of the Rings Online is not that far behind, I suppose. And might well, I don't think that would go that long either. But let's say it did. It's eking out an existence. But, you know, WoW, yeah. So I can see it getting to 20 just because Blizzard would do that. But I don't see it after that. But it's very difficult. Wow, I don't think computer games get stars on the Walk of Fame, do they? Don't you have to be actual people or at least a dog to get a star on the Walk of Fame? Ultima Online, I don't know actually. Is Ultima Online still going? But what I'm talking about specifically is not just keep going, you know, rumbling along, but I mean specifically with like lots of investment. What will be the last expansion? If it was up to me and I was going to do a last hurrah, it would be Azeroth waking up. The Simpsons got a star on the Walk of Fame. How did they put their hands on? How did that work? They don't exist. Did someone make some cartoon hands to like dip into the cement? But yeah, I would see the last expansion has been Azeroth waking up, and well, what I always saw as us moving to another world, and then starting a whole new Warcraft game. That being said, there are a lot of plot holes with that idea. First of all, if you were going to evacuate, why would the Horde and the Alliance still all both move to the same world? That would be a bit strange. Yes, WoW 2, the mobile game. That is genuinely what I fear. Because MMOs are coming... Like, you can get RuneScape on mobile now, can't you? I mean, that's a game that's been going on for quite a while. I think it... Didn't it... Isn't effectively... It's like a second version of RuneScape. I've never really played RuneScape, so I don't know. I get the impression that it sort of disappeared and then came back. I don't know whether it was a revamp or a complete reboot, but... Nonetheless, that is a game that's been going... That predates WoW, doesn't it? Really. I know when I was playing vanilla WoW, I had a number of students, the school I taught, that did play RuneScape. But I could never see the appeal. If they did that, I hope they play something the same. Well, I hope if there is another MMO, and it's a PC MMO, that they modernise it a little bit. They may have done... I don't know anything about RuneScape, so I don't know. I just got the impression that it sort of disappeared for a bit and then came back. Whether as a completely new game or not, I don't know. Because I've got nothing to do with it. I'm just sort of vaguely aware of it. But yeah, factions are a very bad idea for PvE. I've always said so. And I'm very pleased that in modern MMOs now, and I say modern MMOs, I mean basically most MMOs that aren't WoW, that you don't have this problem. That there is... there's either a complete separation of factions in PvE, or they merge together like in Elder Scrolls Online. Either of those things is fine. Like Star Wars The Old Republic, complete separation of the factions. You do have factions. Elder Scrolls Online, for PvE purposes, there is no factions. The factions only exist for PvP. I can't imagine a WoW 2 either, I have to say. I could have imagined it a few years ago, but then WoW has rumbled on. The reason I can't imagine it is not because... Well, here's the thing, and I've said this before, but I'll go through it again. Like, here are the issues with doing a World of Warcraft 2. First one, you can keep development secret for a time, but at some point... people are going to find out about it. In fact, you have to let people find out about it because you have to start marketing it. At which point, it's still not ready to bring out. It's a good year or two ready for before release. People are going to be thinking to themselves, what's the point of playing World of Warcraft? So they'll suddenly lose a massive amount of revenue from World of Warcraft because even if they keep it going, people are going to be thinking, what's the point? It's a little bit like gearing up just before an expansion, isn't it? It's like, why bother? Just going to get better from questing. So then you have the other issue. So you can imagine someone who's got this brilliant plan for a much better Warcraft MMO. And they go to the people, the Dragon's Den people at Blizzard HQ, who've got their, you know, calculators out working out how much money they can make off it. And they ask you, is this going to make more money than World of Warcraft makes? You cannot possibly say it will. No MMO is going to make as much money as World of Warcraft does. Even a new World of Warcraft. So what you're basically asking these people to do is to fork over $200 or $300 million to develop this game over, say, 4 years. And you're not even going to make as much money as WoW makes at the end of it. Plus, you'll be losing some WoW revenue as soon as the word gets out and people suddenly start going, not much point in playing WoW until this comes out then. And they go off and do something else until it comes out. What about a Warcraft 2 movie? I'm sure it's until it's announced, like, it's really weird, but it's made plenty of money to do one. Even if America doesn't like it, the rest of the world does. So they easily could do a Warcraft 2. In terms of a Warcraft 4, if you're talking about an RTS, I think whatever the next Warcraft game has to be would be a big budget one. And I don't see RTS. RTSs, I think, have had their day. It could be argued that PC MMOs have largely had their day. I as much as I hate to say it, I do think the mobile one is more likely. I don't like to say that because I wouldn't play it. I don't even play console games. The Lich King movie would be great, and I wish that's what they'd done, if I'm honest. It's all very well saying, oh, what we should really do for the first one is go right back to the beginning, blah, blah, blah. No, they should never have done. They should have done the most compelling storyline that there is in the Warcraft universe for the first movie to really get everyone excited, and then you can either go forwards or backwards in the timeline. The Lich King story is, even though it's not necessarily hugely original in itself, but it is easily, along with the Illidan storyline, but that would be a bit too weird. I think the Arthur storyline would be a lot more relatable. That would have been the obvious one to do. That's the one they should have done. You wouldn't have had people calling it a Tolkien ripoff for a start. You know, it would be largely involving humans, so fairly relatable there. You'd have had other races in there still. It would have been a way better one to do. And then, as I say, you could have gone forwards or backwards like they do with films. I keep going out of focus. This webcam is annoying me. But they didn't. You know, they chose to go back and, I think, suffered the consequences of it, because there are certain... And as I know most of them are located in North America rather than the rest of the world. But still, you know, the world, that's a big market. And they didn't like it because they just saw Tolkien ripoff, or for whatever other reason. Also, too many characters. I think that was one criticism levelled at it. There was a lot of characters in it, which is fine if you play the game and have played the game for a while because you're familiar with those characters. But not if you're not. There's a lot of characters in there, and it's not actually even that long a film. Whereas with Lich King, there wouldn't need to be that many characters. You'd have Arthas, you'd have Uther, you'd have Jaina, you'd have Terenas. You'd probably keep Medivh out of it. You'd have Mal'Ganis, the Lich King himself. You wouldn't have to go through the whole Legion thing or origin of the Lich King. You wouldn't have to do that. Muradin, I suppose. You know, you wouldn't need that many characters in it. Well, Diablo may well get a mobile version, but the key thing is there has to be another Warcraft game. They're not going to end their most successful franchise. There will be another Warcraft game. What it is, I don't know. When it is, I don't know. But there has to be one. And they must be thinking about it as well. Surely they must be thinking about it. Would have been too much to explain in one move they did the Lich King. I don't think so. I think you're only thinking that game because you think to yourself, well, the Lich King himself is basically the disembodied spirit of an orc from Burning Legion, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to explain any of that. You don't have to explain, you know, about the war. You don't have to explain anything other than to just focus on the Arthur story. That's all you'd have to do. No, Hearthstone was just someone's weekend drunken bet, which came good. I really don't think they have to explain anything like about the origin of the Lich King, and I don't think they have to explain origins of the character. I think they could just set it at the start of, you know, this mysterious plague appearing, and they could just then go from there. And you would get away with it. I played Arthur's in Warcraft 3. You had to do the campaign. Yeah, well, this is the thing, you see. You can do that. You just basically need to tell what is the most compelling story, and then you can do prequels. That's what I mean. You can go backwards in the timeline. You can do prequels. You can do sequels. You can go forwards or backwards, wherever you want. You don't start it at the beginning unless the beginning is the best part of it, which it isn't in the case of Warcraft. The beginning is the most muddled part of the whole thing, because there was next to no storyline in Warcraft 1. The only story to Warcraft 1 is what was written in novels later on. You know, not from the game itself. And there were quite a few things changed anyway. What's the story of the Scourge? It comes from... It's a Burning Legion plan to subjugate the forces of Azeroth, basically. So Ner'zhul, who's an orc shaman, who initially was their puppet, but then he worked out what they were about. So they imprisoned him, basically. And they made him... They sort of tortured him. And then they made his spirit into the Lich King. And they bound it in the armour that's in the... Or there was in the Frozen Throne. And gave him, like, somehow, I don't know how, powers of undeath. Again, that's another confusing one when you come back to the old Warcraft Chronicles, isn't it? Because necromantic magic down there, Burning Legion with their fell magic up there, Titans with their arcane magic, where does, you know, how did they suddenly learn death magic? But we've glossed over that, we don't care about that. But yeah, so it was his job to weaken the opponents of the Orcish Horde, because the Orcish Horde were their things to go on and wipe out the native forces of Azeroth, so that they could then summon a portal again, get Sargeras over there to kill Azeroth, because the last time he tried to do that, it was those native forces, those native peoples, that ended that plan. But then Ner'zhul didn't really like being the puppet of the Burning Legion, so he started doing his own thing. And then the Burning Legion, like Kil'jaeden told Illidan to kill the Lich King, that didn't work. But what the Lich King did, he, out of his stone case, ice case, he threw out the sword so that Arthas could find it. And then once Arthas took it, that was it. It was his slave. And then eventually he sort of merged with him. Why can't Sargeras just travel over to Azeroth? I imagine it's because it's a bloody long way away and he hasn't got a spaceship big enough for him. I don't know. I'm not... But either way, the way he has to travel around is via portals. And those portals have to be summoned to be big enough to get him through. But I'm not sure that Titan transportation has ever been covered in any serious way. It just seems to be the case that to get Sargeras to Azeroth, he seems to need a portal. And that was what was being summoned in the War of the Ancients. And then it was sort of stopped. You tell me. Don't know. it's you're right, it's true. But nonetheless, when it comes to getting to Azeroth, he needs a portal. I don't know how he's able to travel all over the rest of the Great Dark Beyond and not Azeroth. But whatever it is, maybe there's some super secret force field around the whole solar system that prevents him getting there. So he has to be ported into it. I don't know. It's never... I was going to say it was never adequately explained. It's never explained at all. But of course, we're now going to let him do that because we've brought Argus to Azeroth. And he can get to Argus, apparently, when he wants. Isn't it protected by the old gods? Well, not well, I don't know. Because he was being summoned into it in the War of the Ancients. And then, I suppose it was mostly dragons and elves that stopped him, but a few others as well. Now, of course, it could be argued that they are, as I've said before, they're like creatures of the old gods anyway. But the old gods themselves certainly weren't going to put a stop to his summoning. Have I been under pressure getting videos out with so much speculation on the next expansion? No. I have so much time to do videos. I quite like doing the videos, so I spend as much time as I have doing the videos. Like, I have a huge long list of videos I would like to do. And, I keep looking at my list. Sometimes the priority changes depending on what's happening. Like, there's a video that I actually wanted to do at the weekend that I'm going to try and do after this tonight. That, if I leave it any later, I won't bother at all, because that's the problem. With some videos, there's like a shelf life on it, and once it gets above a certain point, then you think, well, there's no point now. That's happened with plenty of them. But I don't feel pressure or anything, I just do them in the time that I have. And I can only do... The only decisions to be made are which ones I should prioritise. Have any of my students ever asked for a boosting raise? I don't know that any of my current students even play World of Warcraft. I mean, they always find me because teenagers are nosy, and they look people up on social media. Like, it was actually quite funny. I was reading something today about like the generation, like the 16 to 22-year-olds, like that sort of. I don't know quite how you call a 6-year gap a whole generation, but anyway, and it was supposed to be a series of people railing against the idea that generation of people are lazy and social media obsessed. Now, I would say it's certainly not true to say lazy. No generation is lazy or more hardworking than any other generation. But that generation is most definitely social media obsessed, because I teach them and I know this. And they are. They look you up straight away. So when we're done with the Void and the Titans, I don't think we can be done with the Void. Like, literally, it's half the universe, isn't it? So I don't think we can ever be done with the Void. Like, the Burning Legion was sort of doable, even though I'm not happy about the fact that we are finishing it off. But it was doable because ultimately all it was a Titan. And if one Titan can kill a load of Titans, then presumably there's forces in the universe that can also put paid to that one Titan as well. And once you've done that, obviously demons don't disappear, but it's always sort of clear in the lore that demons are not very organised. They're just creatures of, like, well, as it says, disorder. They're not very good at forming plans, which is why the Eridar, that's why Sargeras took such interest in the Eridar, because here you had powerful spellcasters with a brain, so they could be his, like, generals on the battlefield and tacticians. But the actual demons themselves are supposed to be as thick as mince. So, they're not going to be a cohesive force without Sargeras. Does that mean the Twisted Nether will be destroyed? No, because the Twisted Nether is nothing to do with Sargeras either. The Twisted Nether is a part of the universe. It's the part of the universe that sort of spawned demons. And demons aren't going to disappear. They're just no longer going to be under the control of Sargeras, that's all. But that'll just make them malevolent but disorganised. So they will be less of a threat to an individual world. Potentially more of a threat to other worlds. The Burning Legion done, yeah. But demons will just have their freedom to just be stupid again. But, you know, the void itself is a different thing, because that's, as we sort of discussed there, a fundamental cosmic force. Corrupted Titans. Well, this is... I don't think we will see Corrupted Titans because, again, in the Chronicles, it does say that... Or it sort of says that the Void Lords only need to corrupt a single Titan and they could destroy the universe. So that basically suggests that you can't even afford to let them corrupt one Titan. I mean, quite how one Titan destroys the universe, again, is not really discussed in any great detail. But it does say that it is possible that a single corrupted Titan could destroy the universe, which is what the Void want, for whatever reason. Absolutely, there are more Titans in the universe. They just weren't found. Like Azeroth has been found. And yes, there are likely to be others. I mean, there was another Titan. There was a World Soul that Sargeras did destroy, because he did come across a World Soul that was being corrupted by old gods elsewhere, and he destroyed it. That's where he first came across this problem. How could a Warlock control a Void Walker? It's not a demon, it is a thing from the Void. Yeah, that's... I mean, that's what I was saying to someone quite recently, because they were querying that, and I said, well, you know, you have Void Walkers. And also, Warlocks can still imprison demons. It doesn't need to be a Burning Legion for them to be able to, you know, summon a demon from the Twisted Nether. The Twisted Nether's still going to be there, and demons are still going to be in the Twisted Nether. Just pluck them out, same as you did before. Well, Sargeras didn't want to destroy the universe. He just wanted to kill all life. But his plan was that if he kills all life, see you later, then it might re-emerge later on. He just wanted to basically kill all life so there was nothing for the old gods to corrupt. So the old gods would disappear, and then maybe life would respawn at some future point. I'm pretty sure Illyria is supposed to be more powerful than the average Shadow Priest. But I don't know. Well, I have no idea, Action Man, what their intention is. A lot of this stuff, I'm going to be honest, I don't think they think through everything they write in here, really. I think they only, if they consider anything at all, it's only the stuff that they intend to reveal in the game at some point in the foreseeable future. So anything else is, I think they just see it as embellishment, and they just write any old pony because they don't think they'll ever have to explain it. You know, if they never allow a corrupted Titan into the game, they never have to explain how it would destroy the universe. What's that? Oh, I missed something. But anyway, yeah. I mean, obviously the lore, I think, is going to sort of shift, or our understanding of it is going to shift with the next expansion. Oh yeah, that's the saying. Yeah, the issue with MMOs is that it means we're all special if everyone is, no one is. It's like the saying you say, isn't it? It says you are unique, just like everybody else. Have I considered that instead of the sea, we might go underground for the next expansion? We might go underground for the next expansion, but we are most definitely going to islands. They remember there was by accident or design, I don't know. You would think by accident, but it seems a really strange accident to commit, but it's possible. There was data mined models, Kultiras models, that were undeniably Kultiras models, not just because they were called that, but because those models had maps of Kultiras on their armour. That, basically, they're not going to do all that as a red herring. That's a lot of work to give an art department for a laugh. So we are most definitely having some involvement. It doesn't prove we're going to Kultiras, but there is some involvement with Kultiras there. I don't think it's a trick. For a start, Blizzard have never done that. They just don't say anything and keep it all quiet. And the other thing is, it's an awful lot of work. There are much, if they wanted to throw a red herring in, there are much cheaper and quicker designs you could come up with to put into the game files than a fully realised multiple sets of armour with all that stuff on it. Well, maps on armour might be strange. But, you know, I mean, they are mariners. They presumably get lost quite a lot. No, it's too much work. As I say, there are easier ways they could do it if they wanted to do it. It wasn't April the 1st either. It was like August. But, you know, if they wanted to do it, there are easier ways to do it than having a whole, well, not even just one set of armour, multiple sets of armour created. I mean, apart from anything else, one easier way to do it would have been to release some of the levelling armour that's genuinely for the next expansion, but just to call it Kultiras armour. You know, they could have just named it that for the files and put it in. Maybe the South Seas is just a scenario that sends us underground. You're obsessed with going underground. No, I think... I mean, I'm not saying it's all going to be sailing the South Seas, but I think that's where we're headed. The other thing is you've got to consider where are the new zones. Where are our zones going to be? We are running out of places to go. In fact, I might even argue that after this next expansion, we will have run out of places, so Blizzard are going to have to do something else. I don't like the prospect of having to keep going to different planets, especially if it's the same bloody planet. We've been to Draenor twice now for whole expansions. They weren't just Oh, do you mean the different ones? Well, no, they were newly designed sets because, as I say, they had the armour thing on. I mean, they weren't particularly impressive sets, but they weren't new. Well, the thing in Silithus may well form part of some content, but I don't think Silithus is going to be one of our levelling zones. I could be wrong. But I just don't buy it. I think much more likely a pre-expansion zone. Because it has to be borne in mind, in Legion we have had with patches new zones, so to speak. You know, with the Broken Shore, I know the Broken Shore existed before 7.2, but it wasn't populated. So they effectively gave us a new zone when we got to level cap, another new zone in 7.2, 3 new zones in 7.3. I just think Silithus is going to be another new zone, so to speak, for 7.4. I mean, that's just my idea. Or not for 7.4, maybe for the pre-expansion patch, I should say. Because I don't think it will be for 7.4. I think more like 8.0. But I don't think it'll be I think it'll be an event. But yeah, I could be wrong. It might well form part. It might well be our first leveling zone. No, that doesn't make sense either, does it? Because leveling zones are now going to be scaled. In fact, there is a suggestion that all zones could be scaled. It's not just a wish of mine. There is some suggestion that they might actually be getting ready to do that. In which case, it certainly makes no sense to have Silithus as a leveling zone, because it's completely out of the way of any other possible leveling zones we might have. So yeah, you know, I'm fairly sure it's just a pre-expansion event. We have multiple Azeroths in other dimensions. No, it's just the alternate universe thing, the alternate timeline was a stunningly bad idea. Stunningly bad. They did it for one reason only, so that they could go ultra nostalgia. It sort of worked in that they got loads of people to buy the expansion, and then they completely failed to back it up with any content, which I was quite pleased with, because I thought the whole premise was god awful. I don't think Sargeras knew about Silithus or indeed Azeroth when he was doing his leveling. I mean, there are a few things I fear about the next expansion. I fear that they're going to attempt to do some form of naval combat. Mostly because that's what they did in Warcraft 2, which was the first time they sort of had Kulturas as a thing in Warcraft. So maybe that's just me being pessimistic. And the other thing is I fear an underwater zone. And getting that anchor does nothing to assuage that fear. Even though, you know, that's using Legion materials. I can think of no other reason to have that anchor. Underwater, underground. No. I don't want an underwater one. Even if it sort of works better than Vashir did. Well, that's just a flesh wound, so Azeroth will still be fine. She's got us protecting her. No need for flying in underwater zone, but that's the problem. There's no need for flying, but we end up with like really slow movement. Like I'm here, I'm wanting even faster flying mounts now. I think we've had 310% speed for quite a while now. We got that, well, if you were lucky enough to get Kel'Thas's mount, the Phoenix, then you've had it since TBC. But in terms of, I mean, I got it with the Black Proto Drake in the start of Wrath. So it's been around for a long time now. It's time they upped it a bit. Can we use, well, the Seahorse is only usable in Vashir, isn't it? Unless, of course, you got the rare one. Then I think you can use that in any aquatic environment. Maybe now would be a good time to try and farm it. Magni is the new Khadgar. He might be, but I'm thinking, I don't know, it's weird, because I was sort of thinking maybe they're setting up Illyria for that. But Illyria doesn't like the Horde. And although, you know, I imagine that after 1,000 years she was sort of okay with them. Because I was asking someone before, wasn't I? On Saturday, I think it was. How, because I've not done Argus as Horde. So how does she behave with them? And they just said she doesn't really say anything. But she super hated the Horde in the events in Warcraft 2. And it didn't sound like she'd mellowed that viewpoint on Argus, because when Varisa's telling her about Sylvanas, she's going, how can she be war chief of the Horde after what they did to our people? You know, so she really doesn't sound like she's ready to forgive and forget. If they did up the mount speed, would I rather it come as a rare reward? I'm fine with that. No, it doesn't have to be a... No, I don't think it should be just a purchasable upgrade. I think you should have to do something for it, whether it's a quest chain or just a rare drop or, you know, something like that. I don't care. As long as it's, you know, but I just think, as well because you don't get flying for a while anyway, it's like they make you do the game for, you know, 8-9 months. And explore it all anyway. So once you've done all that, what's the harm in just going a bit faster? New woodworking profession. No, we have enough professions. Make boat mounts. Well, that's not going to be much good underwater, is it? It'll just fill up and sink. But I am thinking maybe... I don't really do mount farming, but maybe I should give consideration to farming that seahorse. Have one what for 1,000 needles, sorry. I don't remember the submarine in Vashir now. Well, we've got a raft mount from Mop. But I haven't done the new 1,000 needles. I haven't done any questing, really, since they revamped the stuff in Kata. The seahorse you can use everyone moves at the same speed as other water mounts. That's a bit rubbish. Oh, I won't bother then. I've got the sea turtle already. So if that's as fast as anything else, like, excuse me, that I can get, then bugger it, I'll just keep using that. The end. I don't think Argus is the end zone. But obviously they are. Yes, they are getting a bit of stick for that. But like I said, they couldn't. I don't think they could possibly have designed Argus to have flying. It's so much more difficult to design a truly three-dimensional zone as compared to one that just has to give that illusion. And 3 new... I mean, if you think about it, there's basically now... Because I was complaining at the start of Legion when I was doing Alpha, thinking there's only 4 levelling zones. That's the fewest ever. But in terms of actual zones, there's what, 9 zones we've got now. That's quite a lot. If we're going to be stuck on the ground for half the expansion, rather see an upgrade to our ground speed. I sort of feel the ground speed's okay, ironically, even though it's way slower than the mounted. But when you're flying, you want to. When you're flying, you just want to get places quickly. When you're ground mounted, I don't know. You're not always doing that, because sometimes being too fast can get you into trouble. Daze, well, you can stop being dazed, can't you? Can you? Does that leatherworking barding stop you getting dazed? When mounted at any rate? I don't know. Or does it just stop you getting knocked off? I don't know. Yeah, there you go. But I would much prefer faster mounted speed. Like flying mounted speed, that is. Especially like when you have to go to high mountain or back out of high mountain, just going over that or around that mountain takes ages. Look at that. Get me there quicker. Do you know what else I keep doing as well on Argus? I keep forgetting to use my whistle. I've got it upgraded now because I've got the rep with the Argusian Reach, and I haven't used it once. I keep forgetting because I haven't used the whistle for so long for anything. Because as soon as we had flying, there's been no need to use the whistle on the Broken Isle, sorry. And now I keep forgetting that I've got it for Argus. I've never used it. And there are times when it would be useful. There are times when I think to myself, I I want to get back now, just to go to the Vindicar. What's the best way of getting back without upsetting a load of ads? The faster that you travel, the smaller the world feels. Yes, but once you're already flying in it, it's already quite small anyway. So, I mean, that's the argument against flying in the first place, that you've already made the world feel small. So I think it's only a matter of scale. You've already made it feel really small. Just make it a bit smaller then. Well, the problem with using the whistle on cooldown for a few hours and then remembering is you have to remember to use it for the first time. Like, I remember it now because it just pops into my head. And then as soon as and it's even key bound as well. So it's sort of, but obviously you don't look at your binds very often. But yeah, as soon as I go back into the game, I'll completely forget. I'm not necessarily even planning on doing much more tonight because I say there's another sort of video or two I want to do. In fact, I suppose technically 3 because this will have to be packaged up and put up as well. So there's quite a bit. Most successful expansions had flying in. All expansions had flying in. Every single expansion's had flying in. Well, I'm sort of with him on it. Like, the problem is it's in the game now. Once it's in the game, that's it. It's part of the game. There's a few things that you can't change because people will get mad. Because people just associate. I mean, flying has been in the game longer than most of the players will remember, because I can't think that most of the players have been playing since vanilla. So everyone experiences at the very least being able to get flying when you got to level cap. High altitude flying, no. That's just messing about, because then you have to travel upward. You're losing out on you're having to increase the distance you have to travel. WoD got flying only after people demanded it. Yes, this is true, because on the sly they tried to deprive people. They didn't say anything. There was no flying at the start of WoD. They said nothing. Then they finally announced that that was it. There's not going to be any more flying. People went mad. Then they changed their mind pretty bloody quickly. They even tried saying that they never said there wouldn't be any flying. But even then, it took a long time to actually adapt the zones for it. And those zones were a lot better suited for flying than the Argus ones are. So there's no way they can put them on Argus, have flying on Argus. I'm fine with the compromise of doing it via achievements and having a certain amount of time where you don't get to fly. Because, as I say, I am not a fan of flying. The only thing with flying, and people will come out with the argument, well, if you don't like flying, just don't get flying then. But that's a silly argument, because flying is an operational advantage. You know, if someone else has flying, I have to have flying too. Otherwise, they're going to steal all my resources. They're going to fly down in like opposite faction death squads and gank me. So yeah, and also it's speeding up the time it takes you to do those rotten world quests. Design around flying. The problem is that as soon as you allow someone to have flying, like people have said, the problem with Wrath and TBC and stuff like that, because you were going to get flying as soon as you got to level cap, what is the point in asking the world designers, the guys who actually design the terrain and everything, to make really detailed, intricate terrain with lots of nice features on it and, you know, interesting terrain, stuff like that. When a few days after people are going in it, they're going to be able to fly around anyway. That's the problem. So ultimately what happens is those guys don't waste their time on it and they will produce boring landscapes. And the Wrath landscapes were boring. Right? They might look pretty to fly over because that is one advantage of where you do consider flying. But they are absolutely rubbish on the ground. There's no interesting terrain in the whole of Wrath. Because they know as soon as you get to level cap, you're flying. In fact, you didn't even have to get to level cap, did you? I seem to remember... Oh, actually, hold on. Was that just in the beach or did it go live as well? There was a quest you did in Shalazar Basin, wasn't there? I can't remember if that was just the beach and they changed it for live, though. I've forgotten. But nonetheless, yeah, I thought you could get it before level cap. But anyway, the point is that you only had a limited amount of time where you couldn't fly anywhere. Like a few days. So why would they spend a lot of time? In what way were they good, though? I never had any problem getting from A to B in any of the Wrath zones. Like when I was on my ground mount. Whereas in Legion, you've sometimes sort of known where you want to get to, but you haven't been. It's not straightforward how to get there. Even with the map, you've had to try and work out where the path is. I never experienced that once in Wrath. The only time I experienced it at all, actually, was in TBC, ironically, but that was because I was stupid. Because I leveled my last couple of levels in TBC in Shadow Moon Valley. Now there, the terrain was awkward, especially when you got to the sort of the eastern parts. It was very, very awkward, and like you'd have to wade through a lot of very tough trash, and then the trash would respawn, and it was tough going. And then I found out later on that actually I should have leveled my last couple of levels in Netherstorm. But from my point of view, Netherstorm was impossible to get to without a fly map, because when you looked on the world map, Netherstorm was detached from the rest of it. Now, I now know that there's a land bridge from the northeast of Blades Edge Mountains to there. But the problem was that I hated Blades Edge Mountains so much that I did the first few quests in there and I thought, no, this is crap. And I didn't go back again. So I never discovered that bridge. So I thought Netherstorm was only for flying. Whereas in actual fact, Netherstorm was absolutely fine for ground mounts. And Shadow Moon Valley was a bit of a bugger without flying. But my point is, Kasich Shasha, it's not whether you enjoyed the levelling or not, or the questing. It's whether the terrain itself offered puzzles to you. And I can't think of a single bit of Wrath that offered a puzzle to solve in terms of how to get from A to B, in the same way that they do in Legion and also WoD come to it. Because there it was worth their while designing interesting terrain where it wasn't really clear how to get from one place to another without thinking about it and exploring, more to the point. You have to sort of try a few places. No, that's not it, and so on. But it's not worth the developer's time to do that if you can just fly up, across, down to wherever it is. But anyway, I'll open it up for the last few minutes because that's 9 o'clock my time anyway. I think a lot of people would go with the Wrath flying philosophy, Retpal, because that's what a lot of people have experienced. With that's what they associate with World of Warcraft, which is why Blizzard was so foolish to say no more flying, and it's why they're pushing it to the extreme to even do what they're doing now, because people like that, because that's what they started the game with, or most people start the game with. WoD, I'm not sure, was designed with no flying in mind. I think what they actually said about the WoD zones is that they were designed with not knowing in mind. I think the idea was that the early development of the WoD zones was done before a decision had been made. Which is why, although it took a while to activate flying in them, to redesign them so that you could fly, it wasn't impossible. They could do it. Because I'm pretty sure they said, whether you believe it or not is another matter, but I'm pretty sure they said, in fact I'm certain they said, that when they were being developed they didn't actually know whether they were still deciding whether or not. Because as they said, within the design team itself, there were some people who think flying should have been stopped and some people who thought it should have been kept. I have seen the latest post on the Crucible. I only just saw it today. I thought it was from today. But I have seen it. I was going to talk about it in a video after. I talked about it at the start of this stream, actually. I was going to just mention it again in a separate vlog. Oh, it was 4 days ago. Really? I hadn't seen it before today. Oh, maybe I won't bother then. I'll just mention it in the news at the end of the week. Or I don't know. It depends. I've got another video I need to do tonight that I want to do. If I don't do it today, then there'll be no point in doing it at all. But yeah, I'll again, a couple of minutes. We'll just finish this topic off and then I'll call it a day on this one and get on with those videos. Yeah, there were several things that weren't done, Kasasha. That's because the decision was then made before it was all finished. You know, the zones are never finished well ahead of the expansion. When I was in the beta, or the alpha, no, beta, I never got into the alpha, sorry. In the beta, there was so much terrain not done. Loads of it, and that was you know, it took a very long time. There were still bits of terrain not done very close to launch. I mean, by then the decision had been made. They hadn't told us, but the decision had been made. But when it was started, when it was being designed and planned, they said that the decision at that point had not been made. So they had to do it with both in mind. And then once the decision was made, any things that were needed only for the purpose of flying, they just left out. They didn't bother finishing. But it was possible to finish within a few weeks, because it took, what, about a month or so, something like that. But anyway, I shall call it an end on that one. Garrison's class halls. Oh, all right, this very last one. It may be nothing. I think like Garrisons was such a failure for them that I'm sick of doing World Quest. I'm not sick of Arcus. I'm sick of World Quest. Like Garrisons was such a failure in WoD that, if I'm honest, I don't think they want to continue with them. I think the only reason we've got, I'm not saying they won't, I don't think they won't. The only reason we've got class halls is because they keep saying Legion and WoD were developed in parallel. So there were certain core features of Legion that were being developed before WoD was released, and therefore before they realised how much of a turkey they'd made. So it is very possible that with the next expansion, which has been developed entirely after they realised their mistakes in WoD, that there won't be anything. Like, I think, for example, with the class halls, or my last point, I think, on this one, is that, like, I think it's ridiculous, like, for me as a Rep Paladin, that I'm in this class hall with a dozen other Paladins all wearing the Ashbringer. It's absolute nonsense. I don't think it was intended like that. I think it was intended for us to phase into it, like we did with our Garrison. I think they changed that for Legion, because one of the big arguments against the Garrisons was just that you phased into it and there was no one else there, and we should have been encouraged to be around other people, other players. So I think it was purely for that reason, because otherwise it makes no sense. But anyway, I'm going to call it there. Thanks very much for coming on. I'll be back on again with this next week, of course, and I'll be streaming my guild's Mythic Timur Salgueras stuff tomorrow. But until then, I will see you later. I'm going to go off and do some more videos now.